Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
I don't know if you knew this, but former Secretary of Transportation, former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, did a town hall in Iowa last night. You know, that's the state that politicians tend to go to first to lay the groundwork for a presidential run. Now, he's not saying he's running for president, but he's doing a lot of Substack Lives lately. He'll do another one this afternoon, is my understanding, and did a 76-minute long town hall last night with the organization Vote Vets. Of course, he's a veteran himself, having served in Iraq, so that tracks. It just makes you wonder if this is just heavy petting and flirtation or if he's laying the groundwork for a presidential run. All interesting timing, in my mind. When you think about the fallout from the book release, Original Sin, the alleged Biden cover-up. What did Pete know? How much did Pete know about this alleged cover-up? I don't put a whole lot of credence in any of this, honestly, and I don't think Democratic voters, come primary time, are going to give two flips about it. In fact, I don't think by the time we're voting on who's going to be president of the United States on January 20th, 2029, I really don't think that's going to be the kind of kitchen table issue people are going to hand-wring about. Now, obviously, it hasn't stopped Democrats from continually speaking now. Oh, everybody's got something to say about the Biden situation. I'm a big fan of Representative Ro Khanna. Had lunch with him once in South Carolina in 2023, I want to say. According to the Washington Post, outspoken supporter of Joe Biden before he ended his re-election campaign last summer, acknowledged in a statement to the Washington Post Wednesday that he had been mistaken in backing the former president's re-election, saying, "In my few interactions at public events, I found him coherent and proud of his record, but it is now painfully obvious he should not have run. We should have had an open primary. We must acknowledge this truth to regain trust with the American people." Okay, he's not really wrong there. Democrats do have to reckon with the scepter that the American people look at the way Democrats run their own presidential primaries and can go as far back as 2016 and say, you guys aren't really championing democracy here. I mean, they've worked on it. After 2016, they altered their superdelegate system so that the well-heeled, well-connected, the kowtow, the high up in the parties wouldn't have more weight than the people did in selecting the party's nominee for president. Unfortunately, in 2020, the pandemic happened and the whole thing got scuttled. And then we didn't have a primary in 2024. So those reforms have yet to actually even be implemented. Roe's right. I don't know that he needs to weigh in on the Biden situation. And when you hear him allude to the fact that he says, I found him coherent and proud of his record, that doesn't speak to cognitive decline. And it's going to be near impossible outside of some smoking gun doctor's report that someone's hiding somewhere that former President Joe Biden did suffer cognitive decline. It's my understanding, by the way, that Representative Ro Khanna is considering a presidential run. So there's that. Another name that gets bandied about in 2028, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, said in an interview Wednesday it would have been helpful if the party had Biden ended his re-election bid earlier than July. He said, in retrospect, if the president was going to drop out, dropping out earlier would have given any candidate a little more time. This is all Captain Obvious stuff here. He suggested, too, that Democrats would have had a better chance if their nominee, then Vice President Kamala Harris, had drawn clear distinctions with Biden. Again, Captain Obvious. It would have also taken a campaign willing to break with the president on certain issues. Anyway, I think it's sort of notable that some of the more prominent names coming out and doing the retrospect thing are folks that are, I think, sort of pivoting their planes for takeoff in 2028. Mm-hmm. And then there's Secretary Buttigieg, who has been taking snipes from current transportation head Sean Duffy, former lumberjack, former MTV reality star, who, by the way, also served in Congress and has a voting record. He seems to forget that, or at least he wants us to forget that. He's been yipping about outdated communications equipment, specifically at the Newark airport, blaming Secretary Pete and the Biden administration for shortcomings at the FAA, while also having a voting record that shows he never voted for FAA funding when it came up. There is that. There was a bill in 2019 where he and 179 other Republicans are on the record having voted against FAA funding that would have included funding for the agency responsible for keeping air travel safe, along with transportation, housing, and urban development related agencies. That's what it was called, the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and Related Agencies Appropriation Act of 2019. Sean Duffy voted against it. Oops. According to the bill's summary, this is reporting from the Midas Touch, the legislation provides funding for FAA operations, facilities, and equipment, research, engineering, and development, and grants in aid for airports. Sean Duffy wasn't the only Republican to vote against that. There were other, of course, 179 others, but there are also 7 others who voted against this bill who are now in the Trump administration. No Democrats, by the way, voted against this bill. The appointees and nominees who voted against it, though, Doug Collins from Georgia, the aforementioned Duffy, John Ratcliffe, director of the CIA, Lee Zeldin, administrator for the EPA, Michael Waltz, we all know him, the National Security Advisor, Billy Long, commissioner of the IRS, Devin Nunes, who's on the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, and a fellow by the name of Matt Gaetz. Nobody, by the way, has had the opportunity to ask the question because Sean Duffy doesn't do interviews outside of Fox News. If this equipment in Newark was so outdated, he says, should it have been addressed between 2017 and, say, early January 2021? Is there no blame for the administration in charge in that era? The Department of Transportation head then, Elaine Chao. I mean, Donald Trump is not shy about taking swipes at Elaine Chao, so why should Sean Duffy be, right? Oh, because it then comes back on Trump, too. Anyway, Secretary Buttigieg out there doing town halls, doing live Q&As on Substack. Clearly, he wants to run for president. Quick break, and when we're back, we'll start eavesdropping in on Pete Buttigieg's town hall when the Ron Show returns. Follow along on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL. Call the show, text the show, react any way you'd like. 404-919-2725 or email me, Ron, at ronshowatl.com. Mayor Pete Buttigieg last night addressing a town hall with vote vets.
Last time I was in Iowa, last time I was in Cedar Rapids, I was in my previous capacity as secretary bringing a few $1 million from the Biden infrastructure plan to fix up your airport.
Wait, there was money for airports? Are you kidding me? Huh.
So it felt really good to step off that plane yesterday and have a look around at that terminal. That's coming along nicely. Nice job with that. It's got that new terminal smell that only a former transportation secretary can love. And the last time I was here before that, I was sort of winning the Iowa caucus for the president. So that was fun. So thanks for that, too. So, you know, you come to a place you haven't been to in a little while, and your mind goes to everything that's the same and everything that's changed. And a lot's changed. When I was running around here 5 or 6 years ago introducing myself, I was before COVID. It was before ChatGPT. It was before Chasten and I became parents to an incredible son and daughter, Gus and Penelope, our twins who came into our lives and changed everything. Other things haven't changed so much, including the fundamental importance and crisis of trust in our society and in our country. I believe it's never been more important. 5 years ago, I wrote a whole book about trust, and I think it's even more important now than it was then. And that's part of why I wanted to be in Iowa in a room filled with veterans, because you know a thing or two about trust. You know what it means to trust somebody with your life, even if you just met them, because you have been in situations where there is no alternative. You know what it means to earn trust, because you have raised your right hand and pledged your very life to the preservation of our republic. So we're going to need you. And we're going to need everybody in this community and every community who recognizes the fundamental nature of this country and the fact that it is facing its most profound test in generations. We are being tested on nothing less than whether the United States of America is, in fact, the freedom-loving people that we believe and know ourselves to be. Let us meet that test. Let me be clear, that is not an academic concern. It's one that comes into our everyday lives. Because if this is a country where the government, the head of the government, or very wealthy men who advise and or instruct the head of our government with no accountability, that means that if you're a farmer caught up in a useless trade war, the answer is too bad. If you're a small business owner who doesn't even know what you can order or what you're going to be charging, the answer is we don't really have to answer to you. If you're one of the 10 million Americans who we just learned stand to be kicked off of Medicaid if this Republican budget goes through Congress, the answer is go pound sand. That is unacceptable in a democracy. So this is an immediate concern, not a theoretical one. But I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that America will meet that test and show itself to be that freedom-loving people and stand up, not just for some lofty principle, but most importantly, as every veteran knows how to do, stand up for each other, which is what I saw every day I came to Iowa. That means recognizing what we must stand up against and, just as importantly, being clear about what we're for. Even in this moment when opposition to the abuses coming out of Washington has never mattered more, this isn't just about what we are trying to block. It's about what we are determined to build. It's about what could be better, what will be better, if we follow the guiding lights of this country. And another thing that hasn't changed from when I was running around here 5 or 6 years ago is that I believe that rests on the principles of freedom, security, and democracy, correctly understood. And yeah, freedom means freedom from overbearing government, something we should be able to join hands, progressives, conservatives, libertarians, at a moment when the President of the United States thinks he can send you to another country or shut down the broadcast license of a TV station if he doesn't like what it has to say. That is not freedom. We have lost some freedoms in this country during this administration and the previous Trump administration. But we will not rest until we have restored freedoms like a woman's right to choose. We have grown less secure as a country. There is no doubt about it. If the leader of the United States of America, the most powerful member of the human species, is considering taking a $400 million jumbo jet as a gift from a foreign government, that makes us less secure. If the Secretary of Defense can randomly text highly sensitive classified information to some dude on his phone, we are less secure. But just as importantly, we could be more secure. I mean, that's just the bare minimum. We could do so much better. We could be more secure in the face of 21st century threats, from what AI represents to what climate change is doing to us. And we will be more secure if we're the kind of country where, just to take one example, if you wear the uniform and you're ready to put your life on the line for this country, we will honor and respect your service based on your performance, not your gender identity. Let alone try to kick you out over it. We will be more secure when we honor those who serve, no matter who they are or who they love or how they identify. And democracy. We know what it means to be a better democracy or to have democracy slip through our fingers. We've never been a perfect democracy, but democracy is the most important thing about our country, and our country is the most important democracy in the world. We got to lean into that. So I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that we could live up to that. That at the end of the day, the vast majority of people in this country understand that what makes America America is that the American people bow to no king. So we got some work to do. We have to make it clear right now, not waiting for some campaign cycle to play out, but right now, every day, talking to friends, and this is hard, talking to neighbors, talking to that uncle, who we really do love, but he's believing all the stuff he's seeing on Instagram, and we got to talk. It's talking to each other, and yes, it means getting the attention of your elected officials about the policies that they are allowing to go through. If we do that right, we're going to make ourselves proud of this now very difficult, very painful time in our country. A couple days ago, I was driving our son and daughter back from school, and we passed a supermarket near our house, which has a flagpole. And my daughter pointed to it. She said, "Papa, American flag," which I thought was really cool for a 3-year-old. And we started talking about it. I said, "Yeah, you're right. That's an American flag." I said, "Guess what? It has a nickname. It's called the Stars and Stripes, because it's got those white stars and those red and white stripes." She said, "Oh, what else is it called?" I was like, well, it's called Old Glory. This is the tradition of that flag as a battle flag in important moments in our country's story." She said, "Oh, what else is it called?" I was like, Stars and Stripes, I already said that one. Star Spangled Banner. It's called that because there's a song about it. She said, "Oh, what else is it called?" You ever talk to a 3-year-old? I was out of nicknames by then. But I got to thinking, she knows what the flag is, but she doesn't yet know what it represents, what it means to all of us, and what it meant to me. When she and her brother are old enough, I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them what it was like to salute that flag. I'm going to tell them what it was like to have that flag Velcroed to my shoulder when we got into a vehicle to go outside the wire in Afghanistan. I'm going to tell her and her brother one day what it felt like that handful of times that, as an officer, I had the solemn ceremonial duty of taking that flag and handing it to somebody and saying, "On behalf of the President of the United States, the Department of the Navy, and a grateful nation, I present you with this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved ones' faithful and honorable service." One day I'll tell her that too. But before they're old enough for me to lay anything that heavy on them, I'll tell them about the values that flag represents. The story, the incredibly rich and inspiring, and yes, very, very complicated story of everything that has happened under that flag and in the name of that flag. And I'll tell them about how what made America and makes America great is not something that we dust off by saying the word again. What makes America great is its ability to wrestle with its darkest demons and come out stronger and better for it. But that doesn't just happen. These times are painful, they are complicated, but so is every period of history that has ever inspired us. Every person we have ever been inspired by. They didn't do the things that made them inspiring on a perfectly calm, clear day. They did it in the face of headwinds. They did it in the face of pain. They did it in incredibly unstable and difficult moments, and so we're living in one of those, and that's not a fun thing. But in a strange way, it's a kind of a privilege, because there will be no question that we, American citizens, in this moment, we're living in a time of enormous importance, that we would do our part to make sure that that flag and everything that is done in its name lives up to its promise. That's the job of every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine, but it's also the job of every citizen. And citizenship plays out in so many ways, and this is one of them. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you. And with that, here endeth the monologue. The mics are going to go around, and I can't wait to talk to you about whatever's on your mind. Thanks again for coming here. So, if you got something to say or something to ask, put your hand up, and when I call on you, please say a word, your name, and where you're from, and right here in front of me. I'm going to start with you, sir.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
As I mentioned in the first half of the show, Secretary of Transportation, former mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg, has not announced that he's running for president. But when you do town halls in Iowa very early in the 2028 cycle, can we even say that? God, it's exhausting, right? Anyway, Pete Buttigieg last night did a town hall with Vote Vets. We got the preamble. Now let's get to the Q&A.
My name's Mike Woods. I'm a veteran, and I work for the VA. I live in Mount Vernon. And as we discussed this morning, scheduling our veterans, our fellow veterans, for care in a timely fashion is very hard, even right now. But with the proposed cuts that are going to be released, I assume next month, it's going to make it almost impossible. What can be done to stop this or mitigate the outcome?
First of all, thank you for serving and for turning around in civilian capacity to continue serving those who serve. As you know, the services that the VA provides, they aren't a gift or a favor. They're America's way of keeping a promise to those who kept their promise to serve. And least we could do is make sure that it is actually possible to avail yourself of those services without, you shared earlier, it takes months to get things scheduled, and you live that. And as we know, the demand is rising. And by the way, one of the reasons the demand is rising is a very good thing, which is the PACT Act, that says that for those who were exposed to burn pits, that you're going to be presumptively covered. It's a big workload for the VA to take on, but it's the right thing to do. I got to tell you, in my entire time in the cabinet, there's only one time that I was actually brought to tears in a White House ceremony, and it was the day that I got to be there when the president signed the PACT Act and extended that care to so many people who deserved it. That, as you know, you don't have to be a VA professional or a political figure or much of an expert to know that if the workload is rising and you're cutting the personnel, you're going to have a problem. Cutting 80,000 people will, plain and simple, make it harder for the VA to execute its incredibly important mission. So what can we do about it? Well, to me, the most important thing right now is to apply pressure to anybody who's in a position to deal with it. And here enter the United States Congress. Now, right now we may not be seeing a huge amount of courage from the president's allies in the United States Congress.
That's an understatement.
But I think many of them, including some who represent this area or this state, are already aware of two things. One, that these cuts are wrong, and two, that these cuts are unpopular. Unfortunately, they might actually care more about the fact that they're unpopular than the fact that they're wrong. Since they're both, this is an opportunity to get their attention. We're all here for this town hall. I can't help but notice that I'm not even elected official or running for anything.
Sure.
I'm here. I can't help but notice a lot of people who are elected officials aren't. There's a reason for that, right? They don't want to have to explain this stuff.
They've been told not to.
Continuing to get their attention changes their incentives. And look, there's this sense of inevitability, of invincibility, right, that the president's trying to create.
Absolutely.
But it's not true. They'll back down. He'll back down when he screws up badly enough. But not as often as I'd like. But they change their mind all the time. They just change their mind about tariffs.
Absolutely.
What are the tariffs? 10%, 120%? I don't know. It's different every day. And I believe that they can be induced to change their mind about this if and only if there is more public pressure for a better policy. That one. Let's see. Red shirt.
Okay, Stephen Miller's talking about getting rid of habeas corpus, and this has been an onslaught since the beginning of the year. Do you think there's any line that he will cross that Congress is going to finally, do something like Republicans?
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
I mean, habeas corpus, this is some really basic foundational stuff about the rule of law, right? And that's what tells you this is not a normal Democrat-Republican fight. Matter of fact, when a senior White House official is seeking to end habeas corpus, I have a question from some people I know. Where the hell are the libertarians right now? I got libertarian or conservative friends who are against the Clean Air Act. And they actually there's a philosophy to this. They don't say they hate clean air, but they are so opposed to the idea of government doing too much that even making sure we can breathe air it's still too much. Some of them even say it's tyranny. Well, if you think the Clean Air Act is tyranny, what do you have to say when they're talking about getting rid of habeas corpus? And once again, I am convinced that members of Congress in the president's party know that this is wrong. They also know where their bread is buttered. Right? They live in an environment where they have more to fear from the president of the United States than the people of the United States. You could watch them do this math in their heads. I believe the most important thing is to change the math, to change the incentive, to make them more worried about how they're going to face their own constituents.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not going to town halls, there are other ways to get their attention. There are other peaceful means to get their attention, peaceful but energetic means to get their attention, that might remind them that if not out of principle, then at least out of political self-preservation, they have an interest in standing up for what's right.
Because that's the only way you're going to get their attention.
I'm sorry to say it's not happening on its own. It should have by now. But you can tell, because they have been forced to back down on some of their most ridiculous proposals, that there is a line. Is there a line he wouldn't cross if he could? No. But are there lines that he can't cross? Yes. And it's up to us, we the people. And we don't have to wait for an election. It's up to we the people to draw those lines and make it clear that you can go this far but no further. Purple shirt. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Army. I live in Brooklyn.
Thank you.
So you touched on this earlier about not voting against something, but what are we voting for?
Yeah.
There's too many Democrats, and there's a handful of them that are fighting for us, but there's none of them that are saying, this is what we're fighting for you, and then following through when they're in office. That's what we need, and I think that's why we're in the situation we are, because there's too many people voting against the status quo, and we don't want our veterans, benefits to go back to what they were. We want them to be above and beyond, because we have more veterans, and we have people who are willing to work for it, and if the money is allocated correctly to the needs, to the actual needs of the people, then we're going to have better benefits for women, for marginalized people, for our veterans. That's what we need. And
That's right.
so my question was, how do we get them fired up to really serve us and hopefully we get it back soon, the power to do this.
I think you're describing such an important point. This isn't, look, obviously there is a parade of horribles emanating from this White House and this administration. But look, there are a lot of people, we all have neighbors who voted for him. By the way, a lot of them don't even like him. But they said, maybe he's going to make me better off. Maybe he's going to just smash everything and come up with something better. He did, yeah. By the way, he did the first half, the smashing stuff up part, right? He did that. Just not the part where it makes us better off. And it is both politically and substantively wrong, in my opinion, if all my party has to say is, let's go back. I am not here saying we got to make things back the way they were in 2023. Look, the hard truth is, if our government, our politics, our society, and our economy were working, we wouldn't be here. Proto-authoritarian populist movements don't just come out of nowhere. They find fertile ground when things are not working. And again, in a room of folks who have served, you know this. You know how frustrating the old status quo with the VA was, even as incredible things were done to make it better. And one thing every veteran is an expert in is bureaucracy, right? We all know so much about paperwork. We've seen Americans at their best, but we've seen government at its most frustrating because we were part of the largest, most bureaucratic bureaucracy in the world, which is the United States Department of Defense. And yet, we can make us better off. So take the budget. And again, look, everybody's talking, including me, talking about the jumbo jet because I'm pissed off about the jumbo jet. But I believe the most important story today is that the numbers started coming back on the budget reconciliation put forward by the congressional Republicans, which last time I checked, literally as we speak, they're marking up in committee and voting on. And it is literally a zero-sum game because the more they do this, the less there is for that. So yes, I am against the enormous tax cuts for the rich that they are pushing through. But part of why we're against that is we're for taking those dollars and using them to make sure that nobody in this country, no child in this country goes without health insurance. To make sure that no child in this country goes hungry. We heard earlier about that USDA program that my friend and colleague Secretary Vilsack had to help make sure that more food goes directly from farms to people who need it. I'm for that. We could do that, and we could do better. And look, we got to come up with some new answers. And I'm talking about my party, too. The post-World War II order, international and domestic, is gone. Or at least it will be by the time these guys are done with it. And the truth is, it's been a while since it was really keeping up with the realities of the 21st century. We need to be presenting answers in accordance with our values on how to make sure government can actually get stuff done, actually work, be more user-friendly, deliver. And that means some tough conversations on our own side about how we get in our own ways sometimes with government. But as somebody who worked for years to deliver transportation projects, I know there's things we could do to make that happen faster and better. And it means being ready for some of these things coming our way. I think even now we are underreacting to stuff like artificial intelligence. Or as President Trump's Secretary of Education calls it, A1. I don't know if you saw this. She thinks there's something called A1, which means she doesn't understand that it stands for AI, which means she doesn't understand artificial intelligence. But for all the problems that technology can create, it can actually create a future where we're working less hours and have more money in our pocket. That's something we're for. But it means making sure that the incredible gains that come from that technology, that we have a policy structure that gets a share of that out to the American people, instead of taking somebody from being worth $200 billion to $400 billion. That's what we're for, among other things. Let's see. Right here.
Tim Nash, Iowa Army National Guard, still serving.
Thank you.
So when I have a lot of conservative friends, especially since I'm still serving, talk with a lot of conservatives and kind of talk about what's going on with the Trump administration. And one thing that I hear is, yeah, we don't know what's going on with him. Nobody really wants to admit that he's just doing a horrible job. But a lot of people then say, God, but the Dems are just horrible right now. Nobody trusts them, and they're just in the toilet. So, and you wrote, I haven't read your book yet. It's in my Audible library, Trust. But I guess my question is, how do we get the American people to trust in the Democratic Party again, as a party of the working person, as a party of veterans, and as the party of patriotism? How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, look, I take comfort in the fact that the president is unpopular. But a fact, by the way, that you might not know, not feel if you believe some of the coverage on the internet. The president's unpopular, but that doesn't mean my side wins. Democrats do not have the best brand around here or in a lot of places. And there's a lot of reasons for that, some fair, some unfair. I think the most important thing is that we connect everything we believe, everything we say, everything we do to everyday life. I'm convinced that the only reason we have politics, the only reason politics is worth being involved in, is because of how every decision that happens in a big white building in Washington, D.C. finds its way into our everyday lives. And nobody knows that better than people who have been sent into war on the orders of people who sit in those big white buildings. But we've got to show that we're about that and not about what seem like these incredibly abstract things. We've got to meet people where they are. We've got to have a different message. Look, I considered it important to make clear some things that were going right in the economy, for example. But there were a lot of things that weren't this last time around. And if somebody's upset, anybody who's ever been married knows, if someone you love is upset and your response is, you shouldn't be upset, you should be happy, actually. Anybody ever try that? How'd that go over? Right? That does not meet people where they are. People are upset for a reason, and we got to have that dialogue. And that's the other thing, it was right there in your question. You said talking to conservatives, which weirdly, some people on my side have trouble doing. Look, we're in an environment where more and more of our information gets fed to us in ways that are pre-sorted.
Absolutely.
So all I see, I take out my phone, and all I see is, here's this person I already agree with saying something that I agree with. Mm-hmm. Here's this person I already disagree with looking foolish.
Yep.
And here's this other person I don't like doing something I don't like, right? And that's all we get, because that's the rage bait, clickbait phenomenon.
Right.
We have to find ways to cut across that. And there are several. One is appearing in conservative spaces. My unexpected specialty of going on Fox News an awful lot.
Yep, he's done a lot of that.
Podcasts. I'm doing a lot of podcasts. I've never done a 3-hour podcast before. But there are all these sources of information that our friends who think differently than we do about politics are getting information from. That frankly are not subject to the editorial standards of a newspaper. And that makes it all the more important to get in there and present a different way of looking at things. And then the last thing I'll say, offline. We're going to have conversations that are offline. That's what this is. I mean, we'll probably take some of this and put it online, but just human beings being around each other, it sounds like the most basic thing. It happens in a military unit. I mean, it happened in my vehicle. I was in a conversation with people with radically different politics and racial and economic backgrounds. Sometimes felt like the only thing we had in common was that flag. But precisely because of that, we've got to understand each other, and I felt I got to understand the country better. We need to seek that out in neighborhoods, in faith communities, in rooms like this. And it's one of the things I'm determined to do in the months and years ahead. Thank you. Let's see.
All right, so while he picks out someone else to get a question from, actually that was from last night, we will take a quick break and pick up where we left off and see if I can't handpick one or two more questions from that town hall. Extended version of today's Ron Show, obviously at ronshowatl.com or wherever you podcast. This is America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. All right, final 4 minutes. Literally, I have 4.5 minutes of today's Ron Show, and there's way more of Secretary Pete Buttigieg's town hall with vote bets last night. I will give that YouTube link for you in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. I thought this question was really important because we've been talking about how to reach white men, Democrats. How do you speak to white men? And this mom, she asked that question.
Hi, my name is Mary Pat Hansen. I'm a retired teacher.
Thank you.
I always consider the Democrat Party the party of inclusivity, right? We cover and stand for a lot of marginalized groups, underserved groups. But I think we're missing a group. My best job I ever had is as a mom. And so I have a 21-year-old son. And there's this group of white young men between 18 and 25 who we are not reaching, right? And my son totally understands his white privilege. So kudos to you two young men that are here today. Thank you. Yeah. So my thought is to tell people who have nephews, grandsons, sons, and how do we draw that group in? Because their frontal lobes are not developed yet. We all know that, right? And so some of the Trumpism stuff, they think is cool or funny. So how do we get that group of young men to feel like they belong to the Democratic Party? Because I feel like that's one of the groups that we do not reach out to enough.
Yeah. Well, at risk of sounding obvious, step one is talk to them. And those conversations need to happen. A lot of them are online. A lot of these, I taught a day a week. I was at the University of Chicago this spring. And I'd always do a show of hands with the students and ask them where they got their information. And this won't be a revelation to younger folks who are here. I asked them what percentage of, how many of them, I always started with television, because that's how I'm used to getting my news. How many of you get your news by watching a television? You real? Okay. You might be the first person I've met. Do you actually watch television on a television? And all your friends are saying that's really weird. It's like retro. It's going to be like vinyl. So watching television to this generation is like vinyl.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. We have time for one more question.
Okay. Well, then, just to finish the thought, and then I'll take one more. Thank you, gentlemen. They really keep you squared away, these Army types. We got to be talking to folks where they are. That's why I'm going on these podcasts. A 3-hour podcast was not on my bingo card until a few weeks ago. Going to be doing more of those, but also, again, speak to how everyday life is going to be different. If it just looks like a show or a game, then you go with whoever's cooler, whoever looks like they have more swagger sometimes. And that's something that happens when you reduce politics to a kind of a death match, wrestling death match. That's what it's become. We do better than that. But we have to have that conversation and have something to offer besides just these guys are no good, even though these guys are no good.
So, I think Pete Buttigieg has dialed in on something that even Bernie Sanders has talked about for a long time, how the GOP playbook is to divide all of us, those of us who are not wealthy, those of us who are just a working class, poor and working class Americans, to divide us by these other margins. And we see that it's hard as Democrats to herd cats, to get all of the cats on the same page, whether it be Muslim Americans, whether it be African Americans, whether it be LGBTQ plus Americans, women who advocate for women's rights to have bodily autonomy. There are so many mini factions within the Democratic Party that you sometimes forget that, by the way, white men too, working class white men, have suffered just as much as everybody else. Maybe not on the same marginalization trends, but economically, and that's where Democrats have to work on the messaging. Anyway, I'll have the link to Secretary Pete's town hall in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com. This show airs weekdays, 9 a.m., 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Thank you for listening. Take care. Have a great day.